everyone. Welcome to the podcast Leaders of Impact. This is a series where I speak with leaders who have created meaningful impact through the technology, transformation, leadership, and explore not just what they have built, but how they think about solving complex problems which are rapidly changing around the world nowadays. I'm really pleased to have Mark with me today. Mark had a fascinating journey spanning technology, leadership, architecture, consulting, AI strategy, and enterprise transformation. What stood out to me was his very grounded and practical perspective on AI, especially focus on turning innovation into real business values rather than just experimentation or hype. Mark, wonderful to have you here.
Thanks, Vikram. Good to be here.
Awesome. So let's get started with maybe a quick overview of your journey, Mark. I mean, for all the listeners to be able to know who you are, what has been your journey so far, the achievements, the milestones. We are definitely going to talk more about the places where you have created impact. I'm sure in organizations, in people's life, a lot of people who worked with you for so long time. But yeah, I know the listeners would love to know more about you to start with.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working with technology for over 30 years now in various different roles. I actually started my education was in mathematics. So just loved solving problems, just wanted to find problems and solve them. So I was less of a sort of a hardcore coder, although I started my career as a software engineer and moved through the ranks of sort of building software. I was more about finding those really interesting, hard problems and coming up with different ideas, testing those ideas and showing value in those. So I think my sort of career trajectory really took off when I started thinking about software as the business problems that it was going to solve. And that took me more down the path of architecture and technical design rather than just the coding background. And then that's where it really gets interesting, I think, where you can, really start to see the difference that enterprise software makes to organizations.
Lovely. Lovely. So it's been 30 years. It's a long journey. And seems like once you found something that you really enjoyed, this becomes, kind of passion. I mean, when it comes to me, I started with technology, but slowly and gradually I shifted more towards relationship building, people handling. I'm sure, that's part of every leader's job. But
Yeah.
there was a time when I used to be into technology, but I don't know. At one point of time, I gradually moved more towards, strategy in terms of, how to manage things, how to run operations, and
Yeah.
more or less, how to manage people. So, what are your thoughts on, was technology always something that you were passionate to continue to work
Yeah,
on?
the impacts of technology is what I've always been passionate about. And where I am now at Griffiths Waite, we've always had graduates and industrial placement students coming through. And what I love is that they're so passionate about the technology. They're all really intelligent. They can code things really, really fast, solve technology problems. But what we can teach them is what the impacts of that will be and how to solve real business problems. And the really great ones really embrace that, and start thinking less about, what new open source libraries can I look into and more about what problems can I solve for these clients and how can I use technology. And it becomes really rewarding for them as well. So, I think as I've gone through my career, it's been more about leading people rather than just leading technology, but through technology, through really challenging people to say, what will tomorrow look like? What will the future look like? How can we put things in place today that prepare us for the future? Slightly different thinking than just how can we solve the problem in front of us? Yeah, and hopefully I've imparted that knowledge on quite a lot of people who've worked with me in the past.
I'm sure. I mean, everybody who would have been working with you, they've learned a lot from you. Now, that is usually something that you come to know when you interact with those people. Some people stay with us, some people might go away,
Yeah.
following their own path, their own journey. But it feels very special when you meet with those people again and the kind of, interaction that you have, even if you're meeting with those people after a long time.
Yeah.
So that smile, that warm hug many a times, it makes a
Yeah.
difference. Yeah, you really impacted somebody's life.
Yeah, I'm definitely a hugger, and I've definitely always been believer in communities and sharing with the communities. And it doesn't have to be just for the benefit of others. I think that's how you grow and you enhance your thinking. always wanted to be challenged, always wanted to present at conferences. And I get sad if there's no challenging questions. I get sad if it's just questions that are easy answers. It's always been about how can you improve by talking to others. I've been part of, global technology communities where the essence is you want to share because you want to learn, really.
I think I've read somewhere, or I think one of my coach told me this. If you really want to master something, start teaching it, or coaching
Yeah.
it. Once you get into that driving seat where you need to teach somebody something, you cannot do that unless you would have mastered it yourself. So you will put in a lot of efforts to learn it yourself, and that
Yeah.
becomes the motivation. Yeah, I can totally relate with it.
Yeah, and I think something to add to that, what someone imparted in me, that it's not the sharing of knowledge that is the end of the transaction. It's someone receiving that knowledge and understanding that knowledge. So,
Right.
I've been a firm believer that when you teach people, you need to work with them then to see them put that into practice and to see the results of that. Because so many people that you'll teach say, yeah, I understand that and I get it. And they might have understood the words, but do they understand the essence of why you want them to understand that architecture or that particular technology? I think that's where it becomes rewarding when you've imparted some knowledge and then you see it in action, and actually someone's improving what you've told them and become better than you at it. And then that's the success, I think, of a leader.
Talking about the transformations you have achieved over 30 years of your professional journey, I'm sure there would be a lot of those transformations or those successes that you would have loved, or you'd be proud of. But maybe if one or two of such special ones that are really close to your heart that you want to maybe talk about and maybe share those stories with the listeners.
Yeah, and I think without naming names of specific organizations, I think the real solutions that I'm proud of is when we've worked closely with the business and we've actually transformed a business model or a solution that will make a difference to their customers. I get involved in a lot of integration projects and a lot of process re-engineering projects. And the real value will be when you say you can do even better than you wanted in that model. We had a project with a product initiative, really, with a very good kind of like kind of a charity who were doing really good in the world, and they came with an integration challenge that they wanted to move data from one place to another, but get more insights into that and really automate their processes. And when we looked at that with the data we'd got and the technology we got at that time, we could go even further than just the automation in the process. We could really look at the outcomes of that process and improve those. So not make things faster, but make things better. And when you explain that to sort of the business leaders and they go, actually, IT or technology is not a cost center, it's a value add. We can actually amplify if we work together on that. And there's been a couple of examples, but one really stands out where we took that process and we took it to the next level, for real good outcomes. We actually, because that was a charity, we actually got awarded and went to meet the Queen at the time at the Houses of Parliament for the award of what the outcome of that project was. So nothing about technology, more about outcomes, and things like that make me really proud. We're working at the moment with a large global insurance company, and in a similar way, we were looking at how AI could change their business model. And rather than just looking at isolated pilots, we were put in place something where the business can be heavily involved in that. So we did a opportunity workshop. We looked at the blueprints for value. And now I'm really proud of that engagement because I still interact with those business users who are telling me what they've done with AI and what the next steps are. And we're putting in place systems that allow them to innovate now. So I think, in essence, really, the ones that I'm the most proud of are the ones where it's really changed outcomes for those customers or citizens or, stakeholders within that, and ones where the business kind of really start to build that trust of technology and of IT and say, yeah, this can be a force for good, not just a cost center.
True. I mean, once you see the kind of joy that comes out on when the users are able to see the benefits, those are the true outcomes. Whatever efforts were being made, those are the real fruits that will give you the
Yeah.
kind of joy and happiness.
Yeah, and we love it when the feedback becomes, "Wow, that's great," and then their second reaction is, "What if it could do this?" So
Yes,
almost like the users and the business stakeholders are filling that backlog, not with defects or small enhancements, but with real changes that will make a difference for them, and that becomes rewarding as a technologist. Then,
absolutely. So now that you brought up the discussion about AI, I know you have been, doing a lot of consulting and strategy on AI. You have been working with, different enterprises. So in your experience, what are the organizations getting, most wrong about AI today? Everybody's looking for some sort of transformations through AI,
yeah,
through automations. Some people, some understand what AI is, some don't. But
yeah.
in your experience, where are they getting it wrong?
Yeah, I think we see a lot of people getting it wrong at the moment, and a lot of it starts with if they ask the question, where can I use AI for a start? If they're looking for a problem and they've already got the solution, that's the wrong place to start. AI is not this kind of silver bullet that will solve every problem. They really need to start thinking about what problems do they need to solve that maybe AI can help them with. So those that treat AI as just as productivity and efficiency rather than a core part of their strategy, are the ones that end up hitting the barriers from that. See a lot of innovation theatre where the technology teams have said, look what we can do with this agent, and really impressive in the demo, but then
Mhm.
really hard to integrate to make it work in the business's world with the data, with the integrations. And I'm a firm believer that you might paint a vision and set a vision, but you should do that really quickly, and then very fast you should start proving and putting the foundations in that will allow a solution to scale. There's nothing worse. The one thing probably that's worse than a failed pilot is a pilot that won't scale without re-architecture. I'd rather something fail than it to look like a success and then you're not able to scale it. And I see a lot of organizations at the moment with that. The board have set a strategy to say we must be using AI. So people are looking for where they can use AI rather than a strategy of we must improve these business outcomes, and then identifying where AI can change the business model, transform the processes, improve the customer experience to meet those business outcomes. Yeah, so start with the outcomes, not with the tools. I think my advice would be.
So could that be the reason why most of the AI initiatives are failing to create some sort of business impact? Because they're not looking at the outcome that is supposed to be, they're not looking at the impact, they're just looking to do something with AI because
Yeah.
that is something that everybody wants to do, and that's the race that everybody wants to join without actually thinking about what's the problem that needs to be solved, what could be the impact.
Yeah, I think people know they need to act, so they're going for activity over those outcomes. It is obvious that every industry, pretty much bar none, will be
Mm.
transformed in the next 5 years. Organizations need to change to keep up. So there's this urgency. There's a real fear in the boardrooms of an unpredictable future. What will the future look like? So CIOs are being tasked with almost trying to explore what the future should look like. So they want to stay busy with looking into tools and AI. And I think that without the foundations in place, suddenly I've identified that there are three contributing factors to the lack of measurable business output impacts. The first is cultural. People are feeling, well, will AI take my jobs? How will
Mm.
that work? So it ends up the use of AI is very isolated. It's just to help people personally with being more efficient rather than changing processes and business model. The second really is the legacy that's in place in IT to get at the right data and to
Mm.
change the processes and systems. It's hard work in a lot of organizations. There's a lot of technical debt there that is standing in the way. There's a lot of bad quality data. And, I think that it's definitely a balance. You don't want to put in isolated solutions without access to all the enterprise data and enterprise systems. but you can't get all the foundations perfect before you start. So anything where someone's got to navigate kind of a clear path between two things, normally people struggle, and they fail. If it was all just that fast, or let's take a year putting foundations in place, probably the CIOs could build the roadmap. It's more you need the middle ground there. You need to be acting fast with putting the foundations in, paving the road as you go. And so I think that whole legacy challenge is blocking the real value. And I think the other element, again, is the difference between proof of concepts and getting things into production. The amount of POCs that I see that are working in local environment with mocked data, that then when they need to scale it in production, it's just not the architecture to scale. I'm a software architect at heart, I think. I want to put in, if I do a POC, I want to put it in on something that can scale, that can make it into production. And I think with thinking about a few recent clients at the moment, one of the challenges with getting things into production is AI literacy and education of all the teams. There's a disconnect often between the people who are operating systems in production, the people who are building systems, and the people who are using those systems, and bringing those together is mandatory, I think, with AI, because things are going to move so fast. Trust has got to be baked in, security's got to be baked in, guardrails for all of the, the ethics considerations need to be based in, sustainability of pricing of models, all of these. It's all of these things together that are going to mean that you can transform your organization with AI. And I don't think a lot of organizations realize that. They think that they can just, stand up agents to do the job that humans were doing before, driving automation with LLMs, and without really thinking about what that roadmap should look like and what the foundations need to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point, because even in my experience, whenever I have been interacting with these kind of transformation initiatives being discussed, everybody wants to do things faster. With that's a kind of
Yeah.
buzz that AI has created. Now things can be done faster, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. They're not thinking about if it is being done in the right way, if the foundation, as you mentioned, is rightly laid out to be able to do those things. They are not worried about the technical debts they
Yeah.
may or may not know, but they're just looking to move ahead as fast as they can.
Yeah.
So what would be your recommendation to those leaders about, balancing the speed of AI adoption with
Yeah.
governance and trust, as you mentioned, is going to be really important moving forward?
Yeah. And I think the biggest risk to them with scaling adoption is scaling the wrong patterns. So how do these leaders know early on that they're tackling the right problems in the right way?
Mhm.
And, I've never really liked the phrase fail fast, because it kind of misses out a lot of the learn fast elements of it and iterate. So, as a new starter, you can fail fast and move on. What that really means is you shouldn't waste the time trying to scale the bad ideas. You should get the bad ideas proven or disproven early, and you should let the ones that can scale move forward with. And I think that again, with AI, it's about spotting those right ones that will scale. So selecting the right use cases and implementing them in the right way for that. I also think that there is definitely in the market that it's definitely faster to build things with AI, and it's definitely faster to roll out services to your customers with AI, and customers will expect better experiences due to AI. And we see a lot of case studies of, teams are, you're getting 3 times productivity now because of GitHub Copilot agents or Codex, etc. And CIOs have got 2 paths to go here. It's the race to the bottom. Let's do the same with less. Or how can you amplify all of the investments you've made to do X with the same, right? So it's whether you're going to really go for a cost cutting and efficiency drive, or growing the business and supporting that. And I'm doing a presentation next week at a business conference, and I've got in that a quote from John Maynard Keynes from 1930, so 100 years ago, pretty much, that said,
Mhm.
with technology and the way it's going, by the 21st century, everyone will be working 15 hours a week. because they'll be
Oh,
able to do all of their jobs within 2 days. And then society's problem will be, how do we embrace, the 5 days that we've got on our hands?
wow.
And the thing that strikes me about that quote is that's not how economics works. Economics is about investment and growth. In the UK, you've got the FTSE rating, you've got the Dow Jones in the US. It's all about growth, and wealth is about the accumulation of, I'm going to invest to grow more. And that is what's driving investments. And if companies need to be in business, if they're just thinking about speed and doing things more efficiently, only thinking about that, they'll be out of business in 5 to 10 years' time. The
Mm,
ones who will surface to the top are the ones who'll be thinking about, with that save time, what should we invest that time in to
right.
grow and to take us to the next generation of our business models and to be the next leaders in our markets. And then,
Mm,
moreover, with the current investment we've got, how do we amplify that so that we differentiate ourselves amongst everyone else? And those will be the companies that prevail and will kind of grow. And I think that's a decision that a CEO as well as a CIO need to make. Are they going to be investing in technology and AI? Or are they going to use it to just do the race to the bottom, to cut their costs and to compete on price? And I don't think any CEO wants to just compete on price, because there'll always be someone cheaper.
I mean, that's very rightly placed, and thank you for sharing about the presentation. I'm sure listeners who might be interested in knowing more about it, they might be looking to find where they can probably go and attend the presentation that you are going to do. So, can you share a little more insights about where this presentation is going to be?
Oh, so next week, on the, just make sure I get the date right, on the 14th of May in London, I'm speaking, doing a keynote at an AI in business event. I don't know whether that might even be in the past by the time people watch it. So, a lot of the content I talk about there is on my webcast that I do on my YouTube channel. I've also written an article recently about rebuilding the enterprise moat, which is about using AI to add value rather than just sort of cut costs. So, I'm sure, we can share the link to download that white paper. And then I'm also, if anyone's in London in June for the AI Summit, we're doing a bit of a masterclass on how you can put in place the foundations and a system to react and grow your AI solutions. So again, rather than isolate solutions, put in place like a reference architecture and a system and an approach to really amplify the values. There's a few elements that for the UK listeners can sort of attend some of these events to talk to me and learn more.
Lovely. I mean, there is a possibility that I might be in UK for AI Summit. I mean, if that happens, so I've not yet,
Yeah,
finalized my travel, but around 19th June, I need to be there for a workshop, a different workshop. I
yeah,
think the AI Summit is in the last week of June somewhere, I believe, right?
yeah,
20.
something like that, I think. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, if I happen to be there, would love to, attend your workshop and meet with you there for sure.
yeah, yeah. Good, good.
You mentioned about your white paper, it was a great white paper. I was able to go through it where you have tried to explain how enterprises are very rightly placed to, leverage AI to gain their moat. Did you want to talk a little more about that white paper? It's really interesting for people who are looking to understand where so much of data. I mean, you mentioned rightly about enterprises having workflows and so much amount of data and processes. How can they leverage AI and use what are the assets available with them to get to the next level of transformation?
Yeah, I mean that's the golden question, isn't it, for all the boardrooms, how they use that. And I think that what started me thinking about that was a large enterprise client I've got, who we were doing strategy workshops to think about what the future would look like, and it became apparent that they had two real deep fears: one, unpredictability about the future. What would their
Mm,
market look like? What services should they sell? And how would they deliver that? But secondly, because of AI, they were hugely scared that new incumbents to the market would be able to move faster and differentiate and take a lot of their market share. So they were
right.
very scared about startups. And I thought, well, no, this company has got a huge customer base. They've got huge amounts of data. They can really hyper personalize their services to their customer. They know their customers better than any new startups. But they kept coming back to, oh yeah, but the banks had all of that. And Monzo, took a market share. Or if you think about how Netflix moved from fairly small to fairly big, fairly fast, and how kind of, the old incumbents were not, of communications and marketing were no match to the likes of LinkedIn, who moved really fast. Why is it different now? Right. And I wanted to write something that was about, well, at that point in time, their differentiation was how quickly they can use with technology, because they
Mm-hmm.
weren't constrained by customers who expected a certain level of service. They could experiment with those customers by rigid processes, by huge data, kind of piled up data that was hard to migrate into new systems. They weren't constrained by that, so they could move fast. Well, all those things I've talked about are great context for models to really come up with better answers, and great
True.
context for whether you're going to automate with agents or build, intelligence within your process, or use your custom LLM to really give, value to your customers. All those things that were anchoring you and constraining you are the intelligence. That's the knowledge base. So you should be able to harness those and defend yourself against any startups. They won't have with one. We were talking with an insurance company who's been in business more than 150 years and have evolved their business model over that. They should be the best placed in their market to be able to use all of that knowledge and experience and open up that data and all of their failed and successful kind of experiments to offer the next generation of service to their customers, right? The challenge will be how fast they can build the systems to support that. But
True.
lo and behold, with AI, this is getting faster and faster. It's never been easier, to build new custom product. And the companies like that who move towards saying, well, we can build something custom that will differentiate ourselves and will be the next leaders, not the Monzos or the Netflix of my industry. The more they do that, the more they will be successful. If they are staying with commodity and the same and saying, well, we're going to put this packaged application in and we're going to have to transform our data to fit in with that, and we're going to buy low code agents and try and make them work with this, the more they do that, the more they'll slip behind. So, it is the perfect moment, as in the white papers about rebuilding the moat, to build that moat up, build your differentiation, your competitive edge, to really think about, well, what's the next level of my business model and how can I build exactly that, rather than settling for the commodity that everyone else has got.
That's very nicely put. So for all those CIOs or CEOs, or who are looking to explore or find out, how they can probably utilize, leverage their data, their workflows, they might be exploring it out with their in-house teams. Sometimes, they
Yeah.
reach out because in-house teams may not have that kind of expertise to do, what AI experts can do. So they reach out to external vendors. And
Yeah.
again, everybody who claims to be able to do, AI enablement or AI transformations,
Yeah.
my experience, there is always a mix of, different type of people who are trying to sell different things under the wrapper of AI. So, what could be the signals using which a CIO or a CEO can probably identify the direction that this particular service provider or this vendor is not the right direction for me to move ahead. But since you identified,
Yeah.
there is a process that needs to be done. There is, discovery that needs to be done. So I'm sure, there must be some signals which should help CEOs and CIOs identify
Yeah.
this is a no-go.
Yeah, it's an interesting question there. I think for me, one of the key things is you cannot now be trapped into vendors, right? Because things are moving so fast, people are innovating, that you've got to make sure you keep hold of your data and your context and all of your APIs and all of your assets, really. And you've got to have the portability where you can use intelligence from different vendors, right? So all of the principles that we lived and breathed with open source software, I think apply for your AI solutions. Don't get
Mm-hmm.
trapped in. Make sure it's open. Make sure you can have it working with other tools. You know, we've seen it even in the last couple of weeks where prices are rising of certain models. So we very quickly have got an orchestration level that for simple tasks, it will use simple small models. For
Mm-hmm.
specialist tasks, specialist ones. And then when we really want to innovate, you know, we might switch to more expensive models. So the CIOs have got to be in charge of that process. They've got to be in charge of their data, their APIs, the user experience that they're integrating with. So what you are actually asking for vendors is to provide that intelligence, to provide those tools, to provide those either specialist or commodity kind of attributes for that. So, you know, we use something called Whisper Flow to convert conversations into text so that we don't even have to write down our discovery sessions. You know, that's a specialist product that you, at that point in time, would go with the best tool that's benchmarking that, right? But
Mm-hmm.
we need to make sure that the standard of that maintains over updates. So
Right.
we've got to make sure we own the tests or the validation of, is that still good? We've
Mm-hmm.
had it with a simple example like note-taking apps where, you know, you go through a cycle with note-taking apps where the first time you use it and they do the AI summary, you think, wow, that's brilliant. And then updates happen and you start using it and it start using other contexts and you go, you know, that didn't mention Vikram, it mentioned someone else, and the call was with Vikram, you know. So you go through that bit of disillusionment. It's almost like the Gartner hype cycle, but for, you know, experience, where you go, oh, that's not quite right. And then you understand how to use it, you give it more context. And then someone somewhere else is going, oh, this note taker's much better. So you switch to that, you bring all the context out. You've got to be able to understand, you know, are these still things working for us? So own your tests, own the context, own the inputs, you know, rather than give all of that to you know, a large package vendor or a large LLM vendor. I think keep control. That would be my advice, I think.
Yeah, but you cannot just, anything and everything coming out as an outcome blindly. Yesterday I was having a podcast recording, and the way we had prep call, I had a similar sort of discussion with one of the guests, and I was not able to remember like which book we needed to
Yeah,
maybe, have a discussion
yeah,
about. And I went through the transcript and I put it on in the chat GPT, and I was like, okay, go through the transcript, find out the discussion about the book. And there was no mention about the book.
yeah,
That is what the output came in. And I had to go back and take up, my handwritten notes. I knew there was discussion about the book. It was already written there.
yeah.
And this is how, something as you mentioned, you need to have the control test validation has to happen from your side. You just cannot trust everything being given as an outcome by AI.
Absolutely. That's a perfect example, isn't it, of human in the loop there, you know, making sure you fall back. That was one important element to you, knowing which book to reference, and you made sure you kept a note of those key things, you know. And it's a simple example, but when you're doing enterprise AI solutions, you need the same principles that if something is absolutely key, there's human oversight or human fallback to that. But more importantly, there's like this test loop of saying, let's feed it back in and let's improve so that the next time it is actually prompted with context to say, make sure you understand which book we are talking about from that call.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned about the smaller models being used for cost saving. In my experience with some of our customers, it's not just the cost saving, but small models have been more accurate in terms of giving output because they are being, trained for specific type of activities, not, the generic ones or the bigger LLMs, which are going to, be suitable for a wider range of activities. So, what are your thoughts on, accuracy of small models versus the accuracy of large models, or the kind of hallucinations that happen with models?
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. You know, the term SLM has often been termed small language models because LLM are large language models. But if you were to rephrase it as specialized language models, and you design those based on some domain of knowledge, like a domain driven design, you know, that is more like how we used to architect, services or, microservices or IT architectures. You'd have these bounded context that would become specialists at certain tasks. You could scale that separately, you could upgrade it separately, you could test it separately. And I don't see that there should be any difference with, the language models, actually, that you will start building up specialist models, specialist agents for certain tasks, and then orchestrate those. And I think there'll be cost savings to that, but there'll also be, improvements in accuracy for that. I'm doing a workshop next week with a natural infrastructure company who really care about sustainability, but they all really care about accuracy and wanting to look into scientific models. And I say to them, if you wanted to build a team, perfect team, to look at a new project, maybe as to what trees should be replanted in a area of urban regeneration, for instance. Would you
Hmm.
just want one person who seems to know pretty much everything about, everything, the expert on everything? Or would you be smart enough to know, well, actually, I want someone who's, total expert on regeneration, someone who's expert on urban sprawl, someone who's an expert on, the mixture of infrastructure, natural infrastructure to meet this. Someone who's expert maybe on the animal environment as well and the impact of them. You could have all of these talking together and debating the best approach, or you could just have this one generalist. They'd always go for those specialists, the army of specialists. And
Right.
that's almost, I think, where we will go with a lot of the LLMs, But we need good integration across these LLMs, then we need good performance, and you can't be paying the same price for all of these army of experts that you would just pay for, one model. So the pricing models have got to be right for these vendors. And we're seeing a lot more open source, models, and a lot more quantized models that can run, at very cheap cost. And, I think that's where a lot of it will be going. So, and obviously it helps the
Is that
environment for that organization where they can run things locally. I was running a specialist scientific model just to show them examples just on my PC here, which again kind of helps allay some of their fears about the stories you hear that, if you do an image of you as a Lego figure or whatever, then it costs 10, 20 trees in the Amazon or whatever. Those scare stories are grounded correctly, because if the large companies are just building these huge models just for that, then it is definitely wrong. But that doesn't have to be the way that isn't the way it has to be, really. Smaller specialist models will be a lot more better approach.
So that is more of a recommended approach. Again, not necessarily always go with small or specialized language models, but to be able to identify where specialized models are going to be a better option versus where maybe, the large language models could probably
Yeah,
come in handy. That
yeah.
is an architectural decision where if you have the right kind of AI strategy consultation available, they will be able to lead you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of this will come down to design and architecture of these AI solutions rather than just settling for the easiest option of going with a large vendor and just building an agent on it. Might be good short term, but for the long term future of the company, this is going to transform your business. So, put the right thought into it, and the ability to move as things change.
So, is this something where you are more of into consulting and strategy, or you and your team are also able to help out your clients in creating those specialized custom models or the
Yeah, I'd,
architecture?
I'd say less about creating the models, but creating the solutions. At heart, we're a product development company. A client will have an outcome that they want for their customers, and we'll build it with them, collaborate with them to build it. We know, though, that in custom product development, the reason people are doing custom product development is because they want to differentiate, they want to stand out in their markets. AI is going to be the vehicle to do that. So
Mhm.
we made a shift. I changed my role a couple of years ago to really focus on how AI can help people to differentiate rather than just custom product developments. So I end up talking a lot about with the executive leaders about how to do that. And then we help the teams put in place the architectures, the reference architectures, the UI libraries that are focused on delivering better AI components to the clients, the data pipeline strategies to bring the data into that, and then the API and the agent work to be able to make that into automations and processes. So we help people build those products to implement AI for their business outcomes and their business value. I wouldn't want to be just an advisor at the moment and consultancy, because there's a lot of people who say, yes, if you do this, it'll be better. I want it grounded on the reality to say, here's the examples of why it has worked. So, I probably spend half my time looking internally with the teams of learning and helping
Mhm.
them, implement these solutions to see what they're doing, and then using that to look at what the client's problems are, say, how can we apply it to that?
I mean, there's a product we've invested into that products works along the similar lines. I think we spoke about it in a preparatory call as well. So they have a similar concept of, as you mentioned about army of specialized
Yeah.
models. So he happens to be a childhood friend of mine. He used to work with Microsoft and Amazon, and he has created this product he calls Jupiter Brain. So it's a combination of about 28 different models that which
Yeah.
are specialized to take out or perform different types of activities. And with a combination of about 7 different agents, he has been able to create a platform which he is using to develop enterprise solutions for a lot of customers, which makes it faster,
Yeah.
cost effective, and the results have been really great when it comes to accuracy. Because most of the people, when they come looking for a solution for accuracy and cost, that is where he has been able to make an inroad with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's great if you've got foundations then that can be tailored for those customers and be proven, that actually it's more accurate. So that sounds really good.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. You also mentioned about couple of books that you were really intrigued about, super intelligence and good data. So what are the learnings that you would want to share from those
Yeah,
books for?
I think from a book's point of view, I do read quite a lot, and I obviously read a lot of articles and things like that. But I
Mhm,
think the books that I will sit down and read are the ones that really take you out of your comfort zone
mhm,
of where you are now. There are great books on how to build data pipelines from the likes of Nick Tune or team topologies about how to structure teams, which are very practical, but and they're very good, and I like those. But the ones that really inspire you was, Super Intelligence came out. I think it's probably over 10, maybe 12 years ago now. It actually
mhm,
came out even before the Google paper on the transformer architecture, which was attention is all you need, which was the
mhm,
foundation for LLMs. So this book was even before LLMs, and it kind of almost painted this picture that actually the problem now is control and governance, because super intelligence will arrive.
mhm.
Machines will be more intelligent than people. So 12 years ago, that's almost like Philip K. Dick future science fiction kind of thing. And, happens so fast. Suddenly, a couple of years later, the paper came out that LLMs, was based on. And now suddenly, we are talking about super intelligence. So really like that book. It's a bit historical even now, but it really talks about what problems we would need to solve. And I think the capabilities have progressed even faster than expected. So it's a good one to go back to. I might actually dip into that one, again. What really will happen to humanity when intelligence surpasses what our human cognition, is? Yeah. And I think it kind of, that alludes to problems I think about a lot, that if you haven't got the large corporations and governments involved of putting in the right guardrails, then the outcomes could really go out of control. right? And we saw there were a couple of other books so that kind of theme. You had Mustafa Suleyman, who wrote The Coming Wave, which was
Mhm.
all about this is now not a technology problem. It's a sort of geopolitical problem now. It's a coordination of all the large countries. What do they want the outcomes of AI to be, you know? And if it's driven by just wealth and just profit, we should be worried, right? You know,
Right.
but then Ethan Mollick wrote one a couple of years ago called Co-Intelligence. There was a lot more positive about that. You know, it was a lot more about, look, this will supplement humans. We will find the right way, you know, to really add value for this. And what one thing I heard on the radio actually in the UK just yesterday, there was you had it with Reid Hoffman, the CEO of LinkedIn.
Mhm.
He made a point to say that the great thing about technology is it is a leveler really in the world. And he said, you know, when the first iPhone 16, let's say, came out, and the CEO of Apple would have the same phone that a school kid would have at school, you know, or pretty much the same capabilities. You know, a school kid might have a cheaper version of it, but it would still, and that's pretty impressive, you know, that we've got all this wealth disparity, but these technology components, you know, the benefits of any future robots or future intelligence should be for everyone, you know, and I keep fairly hopeful that will be the path that prevails, you know, and when you've got, you know, really, really trusted, you know, people like the CEOs of Anthropic, Dario Modi or Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn saying this is what the future should look like. You would hope that the governments and large corporates allow that to, you know, to happen.
Great. Yeah, that's I mean, to me, it's exciting as well as a little bit scary when you talk about, the super intelligence coming in. God knows how things are going to be. It's definitely a little scary, at least to me and a lot of people. What do you say?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's about governance and control, isn't it? You know,
Mm,
it's about pointing these things in the right direction, you know,
right.
and if they use this for good, I think that's why I might have mentioned the good data book. You know, if you use data for good and you use intelligence for good, then, you know, people's lives will be transformed. So it's humanity's choice, really, you know, and ultimately humanity generally comes across the right path. They might go through a few, you know, kind of, you know, darker turns or corners, but ultimately kind of humanity does prevail, you know.
But there's always those situations, right? Even with the innovation of harnessing nuclear energy, it is being used for good purposes, but there is always a dark side
Yeah.
associated with all kind of technological innovation.
I'm a big believer is you shouldn't let the bad stop the good from happening. You should just
So,
put control
yes.
and governance in place.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any last word for all those leaders, CIOs, CEOs? I know you've given a lot of good insights about how they should be approaching towards, the AI transformations. But any last piece of advice for all those people who are looking for the transformations in their organization?
Yeah, I think the key word's transformation. I think they really, you know, rather than just activity, you really need to think about what your future business is going to look like, what model, and how
Mhm.
you will get there to that North Star, you know, build capabilities, not just activity, you know, and actually start building those capabilities. You start getting the early wins on the right direction to your North Star, and your maturity will compound. It will get, you know, it will magnify, right? Start building up those capabilities, start repeating them, choose the right patterns to follow. You know, try things, innovate, fail fast, but make sure you learn from that and you really back the successful patterns that are going to drive you towards your future business model.
That's so beautiful. Like fail fast, continue to innovate, and look at your North Star vision, not just look for small optimization
Yeah.
here, and that's
Yeah.
not a true transformation. Lovely. It was such a pleasure having you at the podcast, Mark. I thoroughly enjoyed. I'm sure whoever would be listening to
Yeah.
the discussion, they are going to take a lot of learnings out of it. And maybe, who knows, somebody might reach out to you asking for some sort of consulting advice or strategy for their organization.
Yeah, you can see I like to talk, so just get in touch for a chat if anyone wants to. Yeah, no pressure on that.
Lovely. Well, pleasure having you here, and appreciate you taking out time, sharing all the insights and the lovely stories about your journey. Thank you so much, Mark.
Yeah. Well, thank you for hosting me, Vikram, and inviting me. So yeah, good luck with the rest of your podcast series. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you so much.